Hiya, babes, and welcome back to another episode of Thanks for Stopping By. As you all know, Sundays are my guest interviews, and I have a very, very special guest. I'm super excited to have them on. So I just want to go ahead and throw it over to you to kind of introduce yourself real quick.
Hello, darlings. It is I, your punk hunk and weirdo hero, Ravenous Randy Myers, and I'm very excited to be be here today.
I'm super excited to have you on. I've been a pretty big fan of your work ever since I saw you. Technically, in my mind, the first time I saw you was at Hood Slam's Fearless show last year, which is something I want to talk about. But I also continue to forget that I've also technically been in a match with you.
Oh, yeah.
It was I believe it was an 8-person tag in a very small room.
Very small.
Right. But before I kind of delve into wrestling, I just wanted to kind of have you give us an idea of what you were like when you were younger. Were you a fan of wrestling? Were you always, you're a pretty performative person. You're very eccentric. Were you always like that, or were you kind of more shy as a kid?
I've always been on the eccentric side for sure, and the flamboyant side. It was also the people I was raised around were also that way, so that kind of led me down the direction of open-mindedness and a willingness to experiment and just have fun with yourself and really find yourself without limitations. So
Right.
from a young age, I was always very into showing off who I was, very colorful, let's say.
Right. And so did that kind of because one thing I actually didn't know that I learned recently was you actually trained in the Heart Dungeon.
Yes, that's very true.
Were you a fan of wrestling and also of the Hearts growing up, or did you just how did you kind of come into finding pro wrestling?
Okay, well, I was like I said, I was always into very over the top and finding ways to express myself. So theater was
Right.
a big one that I was into, and finding different
Okay.
theatrical ways to I've always been, like I said, a showman and an entertainer type, so that was where I was focused. And then, kind of as I got into my teens, wrestling wasn't really on my focus as a kid at all. I didn't. My friends
Right.
were into it, but I was super sensitive and super soft. So the idea of
Right.
anything violent was really hard for me to handle. And that's why I normally
Okay.
played with. I normally played with the little girls and stuff like that. We'd play dolls and stuff like that. I was more in akin to that than I was action movies. Especially I was born in the '80s, so it was very very
Right.
high, masculine, very testosterone-y kind of characters that were over the top, which looked fantastic, but I didn't necessarily want to inhabit that kind of anger. So watching wrestling was hard for me, or anything with violence in it, until I got older.
Right. So you sort of mentioned doing theater,
Yeah.
which is a big thing. Something that I always wish I had gotten to do, but unfortunately I come from a sports family. Uh, do you feel like the theater scene has sort of influenced your character and personality as a performer? You're very, like you said, you're the weirdo hero,
That's
and
me.
you sort of come off, I think, as a voice for people who kind of want to express themselves. Do you feel like that sort of played into that?
Definitely. I think, yeah, I think that's just me. I think that actually I found outlets that kind of suited who I was and kind of suited the morals I was raised on, and kind of, yeah, who I became due to the nature and nurture of the chemicals in my brain and the people that I was around. So I
Right.
think I gravitate towards those kind of things that are very self-expressive, and a place where I feel that my always felt like my emotions are large. And
Right.
within theater, especially within wrestling, that you can kind of show those extreme emotions, and it's a place to do it safely. Where if I'm acting that way on the street corner, people are gonna call the cops real fast.
Right.
In fact, I've nearly
Right.
had the cops called on me 2 times during this quarantine, because
Oh
I've been
no.
down in my basement doing scenes, and they're just so loud, and people are yeah.
Right. Right.
So I think that's basically where it comes from.
Right. So, and like I mentioned, I do see you, at least personally from my perspective, as a sort of message for quote unquote the weirdos, the artists, the actors, that sort of thing. do you find that kind of scary to be? Obviously, you're pretty well known on the scene at this point. Do you find that sort of scary, or do you find that kind of inspiring to be sort of a voice for a smaller group of people?
Well, that's always what I appreciate you saying that. I really do. I don't necessarily like that
Yeah,
was never
absolutely.
like a goal of mine to do. It's just I try and be the wrestler that I wanted to see as a child, or like the person, the
Right.
entertainer that I would like to have looked up to. And that was one of the things, like I was saying, within wrestling. I wasn't like I said, a huge fan when I was really young. I got into it when I was about like 11 or 12, kind of more in that age, like when you start getting
Right.
some more testosterone flowing through your veins.
Right.
Um, so that's when I kind of like was drawn to it more. But then it was hard for me to find characters to relate to. So to like the idea of that sensitive, or that character that's not just showing one side of them, it isn't just all testosterone and anger and violence and greed and all about like the cool car and the fancy lady or whatever, or person on there, like, you know what I mean,
Right.
like, or the
Hmm.
flashy belts or any of that stuff, like the person who was doing it more for the art form or more as a way to express themselves. And then so that's
Right. And I
basically
think
who
that is
I've
sort of
tried to be.
right. And I can definitely see that, obviously, because along that same line, like I think one of the reasons you've, at least in my opinion, made it so far in your career is you are a very eccentric person. You are very flashy. You're very fun. You know, you come to the ring, dancing. You come out to Etta James, and it's great. But you can also get in there, and what you do, you'll do a kiss or a flirty kind of spot. You can also go. You can get in there and I mean, I've watched you pick up Shaft, so I think it is sort of cool, cause especially coming from someone who comes from a very masculine family and then came out as trans. It is sort of cool to see someone who is just in tune with themselves, and it never feels like you're too worried about being too feminine, too masculine, too this or that. Um,
I really
that
appreciate that because I find that a hard line to draw for sure. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, it can be. Especially when, like a lot of the times, at least for me, I get the sort of, well, how are people going to take you? I didn't want to become a gimmick, right? And it
Hmm.
was sort of, that can be a worry, is people see you being comfortable with yourself and want to turn it into a way to make money with, quote unquote, the queer crowd.
Yeah.
um, you know, uh, but I think that is something that's so cool about a lot of us, is we just one day we find that level of comfortability, and that was something I kind of want to delve into you, because going into this interview, I wanted to kind of do at least a little bit of research, and I noticed the further I went back, the sort of gear template and that wasn't what it is today, and so I'm just kind of wondering, did you have a moment, and if so, when, of kind of going from the early stages to who Randy Myers is today?
There's definitely a lot of evolution through my character over the years. Definitely, I've been wrestling for 20 years, right? So, and
Right.
wrestling for me, like I said, and my performances and art form in general is sometimes something I'm working through when I don't even realize it until I kind of look
Right.
back at it, and then I'm like, oh, that was the reason I did this, or that was the reason I was drawn to doing it this way. Um, when I first got into wrestling, I was coming from a place where, like, I'm just gonna like, I'm pansexual. I've been open about that for quite a while. I came
Okay.
first out as bisexual because that was the term in high school. Um,
Right.
that was before like there was so much noted attention on the trans community until that like opened up, which is phenomenal, obviously.
Right.
And that's why
Hmm.
I've changed, more comfortable with the term pan now. Um, but in that time, I'd had like my first real heartbreak in high school, and that's when I first got into professional wrestling. So I was at a place where
Okay.
I felt like I'd been too sensitive. My sensitivity had always been kind of a thorn in my side. I'd been
Right.
teased and mocked for my femininity through school, just my openness and just being different and stuff like that. And
Right.
to the point, like like as it goes for lots of people, you know what I mean? And like the
Hmm.
bullying and the life threats and the fear of being who you are, and but the fear of not being who I was scarier, you know.
Right.
So then I got into wrestling as a way to kind of like it was faux masculinity to me in a way that I didn't even realize at the time, where it was like, here's these men being their most masculine selves, coming out
Right.
angry, dripping in sweat, muscles, and fighting each other. But they're also wearing some fantastic spandex, coming out to
Right.
wonderful songs and doing these choreographed entrances and trying to look their most fabulous. Like not having a hair out of place, making sure they're all groomed perfectly. And there was
Right.
this line of masculinity and femininity which was being showcased, and it was seen as like masculine. There was no like,
Right. There
and
was
I,
no
I
questioning it.
exactly, it was just like this, and or not even that necessarily. It was like these people are allowed to be this feminine or this flamboyant and this outlandish and this fun and themselves, but still be seen as masculine and not seen as not tough. So I think that's kind of what you were talking about earlier with that gimmick thing, right? Like that you
Mm.
don't want to be seen as you can't go, or you're just this or you're just that. Like the idea of
Right.
being both. So
Yeah, and I definitely can relate to what you're saying, almost in the opposite tune, where obviously, like I said, I'm transgender, and I didn't come out till about a year and a half ago. So in high school, I was living my life as assigned male at birth, and I actually got into dancing for that same reason of it was a way of me to express my femininity without having to quote unquote like fully commit, because I could just go and do it and then be like, no, yeah, but I still play football over here. But, dancing's just like whatever. Meanwhile, I'm out there wishing I could wear the sparkly dresses and that sort of thing. Um,
and
but
then you
so
found the combo
we,
of the
we
two.
oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm wearing a pearl denim jacket right now. um, and so we talk about that. And I wanted to bring it up because, like I said earlier at the beginning of the podcast, the first time I saw you perform, other than the small room we had wrestled together in, was Hood Slam's Fearless show, which is a queer roster that they do every year for Pride Month, and I guess I just want to kind of get in tune of how do you feel about the way queer people are sort of kind of rising up in the business? I've noticed a lot more like that I really didn't know. People like Effie were on that show, and people like you and people like Chic, who owns Hood Slam. Do you find it kind of inspiring, or at the same token, is it also kind of scary to because it is there are places that are not quite as accepting?
No, let's make a whole bunch. Like let's make a gang. Let's make a like gang's the wrong word. Let's make a, like the more of us, the better, right? Like you said, there are
Right.
places that aren't accepting, but the more of us that are out there, and the more of us that are being open and truthful to the community and who we are, the more places will be open to us, and the more places there are
Right.
for people like us. And I like I was raised around my mom's a single mother, and then her friends are a bunch of like gay males, and that's where a lot of my young influences
Hmm.
came from. And those are like
Right.
my father wasn't around, so they were the ones who were there for me. And
Right.
and they were all from like middle Canada, which is kind of like it's the prairies. It's not a lot of open mindedness there. It's kind of like the states where you'd find the more openness comes the closer you get to either one of the oceans, kind of the coastlines. So they
Gotcha.
were from there, and they were like, there was so much shame in being who they were, and they were never fully able to come out to their families and stuff like that in some cases, and then so they moved to Calgary where they could kind of be more open. So the idea that like there's within wrestling, which feels like it's so masculine sometimes to its core and toxic, that there can be this
Right.
blossoming of it within of openness within it, especially coming from the prairies myself. I've had so many slurs thrown at me at random shows,
Right.
mean over the years. And
Yeah. Same.
I wasn't always the character. I wasn't always as open with my character as I am now. People say like
Right.
I've kind of my character's changed over the years, but I feel that I've kind of like taken off the layers of character. So like when I
Right.
first got in, like I said, it was a place where I could kind of hide my sensitivity, show off like my masculine stuff, and kind of boister as more masculine than I really was. And
Right.
then for years, I could kind of I was comfortable in that character, and then I just kind of like started peeling off the layers, kind of like a burlesque show. You know what I mean? And showing more skin
Right.
and showing more who I really was. And the more I did that, the more I connected with the fans, and the more I felt that I was doing the work I wanted to be doing, rather than just kick
Right.
punch. You know what I mean? Like there's like
Mm-hmm.
more than just moves, and if that's somebody else's jam that they want to just have the most technical match, that's awesome, good for them. But
Yeah.
for me, I wanted to express, like, for me, like I said, it was about expressing myself. So the more I was truthful with that expression, the more people opened up to me, and the more it was the thing I was the most ashamed of in high school and got picked on for in my early years. The more I opened up about that through my performances, the more I was accepted. So that was a
Right.
big lesson I learned, was the things like when I came out with mental health issues and depression stuff, there was a whole like reach of support and people kind of understanding of what I was doing and why I was the performer I am.
Right.
And then when I kind of, like I said, I'd come out earlier in high school and stuff like that, but then with my friends, but then I felt it was something that I wasn't wearing necessarily, as like I wasn't holding a sign everywhere I went. You know what I mean? So I could kind of being pansexual and being able to kind of lean into the straight side of it. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
lean into and kind of not hide behind it, but just kind of more accent the that side of it. Especially when it came to
Right.
scenes, and that's where I feel some guilt about it. You know what I mean? Because I could feel like
Mm-hmm.
there were at times where people would have definitely been that this person's 100% straight because I wasn't being truthful with everyone or being, you know what I mean?
Right. When I think that can kind of, because I kind of understand what you're saying. And I think that is a thing that a lot of queer people fall into. I know I've fallen into this where the second I came out as trans, I assumed, okay, it's got to be all glitter, pink, yes, queen, all that. And there are times I'm like that, but I'm a spooky ass bitch. Like I love, wearing black, and I love, like I have a lot of clothes that are still quite masculine, but I was scared to sort of lean into that because I was scared of not being seen as valid or seen as, a woman. But over time, I sort of came into to where it's like, I mean, at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter what anyone else sees, right?
Of
It matters
course.
what we see. But I was also like in this place where there are cis women who are very in touch with their masculinity.
Hmm.
So that's when I started kind of learning the separation of gender identity and then gender expression. And I think it's sort of that same thing where if you lean too much one way or the other, people are going to say hoo ha whatever, but the really the important part is that you are comfortable with who you are and you know who you are and you are such a large voice for other people. And I think that's what's important. Fuck who cares what straight people say, you know?
Fuck yeah. Fuck yeah, totally.
Who
Fuck what
cares?
anybody says if they want me to be in a box or if I don't fit in their box because this
Yeah.
is what they see, this is what they generalize this type of person as, or a person who has this is part of them. You know,
Right.
like we're all, like you were saying, you can be a spooky ass bitch, or you are. Like we have different sides. I've been thinking a lot about like a dice and how, like, like a loaded dice where you roll it and it always lands on the same number or whatever, right?
Right.
A lot of the time we try and we have multiple different sides, but we like to show the world just that one side. So we like to roll it and it only
Right.
ever shows that one side, and that means it's always hiding whatever's on the opposite side of that, right? And I think the best way is to be like, imagine that's all like laid flat and you're seeing a little bit of all of it and just kind of realizing that you don't owe it to anyone to be who you were 5 minutes ago or who you are 5 minutes from now. Like,
Exactly.
just being as comfortable as you are at that moment. There's times where I think everybody's hot, and there's times where I don't want to have anything to do with anybody.
You don't want to touch
So,
anybody, right?
yeah, and there's nothing wrong with either one of those, and neither one of those doesn't invalidate anything else I've done.
Right. And I think we are so often required to quote unquote, especially with sexuality, quote unquote, to prove to people stuff. And it's like the way I look at any type of expression or sexuality or gender is no matter what anyone's views on, right? Like the one I get all the time is like, "Oh yeah, I'm totally okay with that." I didn't ask for your fucking permission. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I no matter what people are okay with or not, that's great. And you can take
Totally.
that over there and take a nap with it. Cuz I'm going to fucking live exactly how I am, and that's sort of I think a big message of what you're saying, which is sort of the dice thing where it's like for a long time a lot of us just want to show the one side because that's what we're comfortable with at the time. But I think eventually we all have that moment where we realize that it's okay to show every side.
Totally.
Um, yeah. Um, so kind of kind of a U-turn from that. Um, a moment I saw finally recently was I got that the IWTV thing, the
Oh, cool.
wrestling
Yeah.
thing. And I finally got to go watch some Defy shows. Um, I love their production value. Their stuff is really fucking incredible. But the first match that I watched was you versus Shaft.
Oh, hey, thanks.
Yeah. So I just kind of want because it was a great match. It looked like a rough time for you. But I just want to kind of get inside of your head. For those of you who don't know, quick context: Defy's from Seattle, right?
Yep.
And they're a very very prestigious and well known company, especially in that area. And recently you became the Defy World Champion. Um,
Yay.
so I just kind of want to get inside your head of that moment, like legitimately. And this is not like I said, I may be a fan or whatever, but legitimately, that's probably one of the biggest fucking pops I've seen at an independent show in a very long time. The New Japan Zoom with all the people standing up. I mean, it was buck wild to watch. So I just kind of want to get inside your head of like what that moment felt like coming in as such an underdog against a monster like Shaft and then ending up being able to leave not only with a world title of a company, but with so much support behind you.
Like the Defy, one of their mottos is that they get loud, and they do. They're the loudest
Mm-hmm.
crowd I've ever heard. And I'll be outside. Normally, I'm nervously outside the building before my match, and I can just
Right.
hear like it's almost like the walls are vibrating from like the echo was inside the building, and it's just done in. It feels to me like just done with so much love and so much support. They've really created something special, and the Pacific Northwest has been a struggle for wrestling for a long time, and for them to like breathe
Right.
so much life and air into it is so incredible. And being part of that company, even just like a sliver of it, I was so excited to even like I went to their first one of their the first show I ever went to for them. I was just a spectator, and I was blown away by,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, by everything. And
Right.
then just being, yeah, Defy means so much to me, and the term itself, Defy, I think it goes deeper than just a promotion's cool name. I think it means like
Right.
defying expectations. I think it means defying the norm and defying the odds. You know what I mean? And I think for
Right.
being the weirdo, or being kind of like being someone who's kind of felt like I was coming at things from a different angle, and there's been an uphill battle, the word signifies so much to me, and what they bring signifies so much to me.
Mm-hmm.
So to be able to beat Shaft that night, and hear that
Right.
reaction, it was like that match was brutal, like you said, legitimately, like
Mm-hmm.
kayfabe aside or kayfabe with it, whatever. There was a lot of falls in that match. There's a lot of German suplexes. There was
Yeah.
the fans being so supportive of me helped me legitimately get through that match, and it was like an adrenaline shot. And so to be able to give them so much back by scoring that backslide with the 1, 2, 3 at the end, and
Right.
doing it off of a move that I learned in the dungeon that was so very basic and fundamental and technically sound, felt like full circle
Right.
kind of, and was so affirming. And I'm still like, I still can't quite talk properly. As you can hear, I'm stumbling for my words, and I'm not normally one to stumble for
Right.
words, but it just more than I ever imagined. It wasn't anything I expected, and I appreciate it so much. And I look forward to
Right.
defending that title at some point.
At some point. um yeah, no, definitely yeah, like I said, it was definitely an incredible thing to watch, um to see those. I rewound a couple times just seeing that the fucking crowd, because the fans make everything.
Totally.
they really do. And sometimes I think certain people take that for granted. I mean, we're feeling that right now with these sort of empty shows, empty arena shows where people are holding up belts and there's no one but the crew to
Yeah.
kind of give a shit about it. So but along that same line, I kind of want to get into that really quickly, which is how has quarantine been? Obviously, if you don't mind me talking, like you said, you've had, and this is from someone who also struggles with it, some issues with mental health in the past, coming from someone else who still to this day is, struggles with mental health.
Yeah.
And how is quarantine sort of been for you? How have you been, and like, what have you been doing to kind of stay busy and things like that?
I've been lucky enough to have done a couple of these podcasts, and it's been great because I've got to meet new people and got to have these longer conversations where it's more than just a text here and there, checking in, seeing how I'm doing, and I say okay.
Right.
Because there's been ups and downs, to be truthful. I think mental health stuff is like any sort of health, that it's a constant thing. You know what I mean? Your physical health doesn't go away.
Right.
We kind of talk about things in time spans with mental health stuff, like it's over or like it's begun or there's a chunk, but it's I see it as we're never completely out of the woods, but what we can do is learn to camp really well and learn a lot of skills, and then have a whole bunch of tools that we can have while we're camping that can make it a lot easier on us, so it doesn't rain so hard.
Right.
But having sort of some creative outlets, I've been making some videos, some workout videos on YouTube or for my Instagram accounts and stuff, and finding creative ways to stay engaged physically has really been important to me, because I can't go to the gym, and I spend a lot of the time at the gym, and so not having that it was really hard. And so now I've got some minor equipment, and I'm doing some stuff with that downstairs and finding new ways to use it every day, and expanding my workouts and into yoga and stuff like that. So doing some stuff I've always wanted to do and having the opportunity to do it. So it's been,
yeah, and I can
go.
I can sorry.
No.
I can definitely relate to that as someone who it's kind of the same, where it is up and down, and I think having the creative outlets, having this podcast has been a huge help, because sort of the same token, I've been able to contact and interview a lot of cool people I never thought I'd have a conversation with. I shot the shot to you, and I was like, I don't know, he may fucking respond. So it is really cool to sort of get to talk to these really interesting and cool people. And so along that same line, you mentioned having the creative outlet. Do you ever sort of, one thing to kind of harp back on the Defy, during the hype package, you talk about, I think a great quote from you was, I've been doing this for 20 years, there's no fucking way I'm going to be here in another 20, kind of, that sort of thing. Do you find yourself being interested in ever making any form of other content in the future, when you are ready to give up pro wrestling, whether it be a podcast, YouTube, trying to any type of entertainment like that?
For sure, and I try to still at this point, because with the way I'm at now is I'm not obviously getting booked on a Tuesday night, even at the best of times, quarantine or no quarantine.
Right.
So I try and find things and that's why I kind of expanded and gone back into some theater stuff, whether that be doing improv shows or trying to do some open mic nights with some stand-up or some sketch writing. So I've already kind of trying to expand. I do painting and lots of different art forms I kind of try and tackle and fail at or succeed at or give it my go, you know what I mean? So yeah, no, I've got a bunch of scripts in my head that need to be done at some point. I really do the format of podcasting with these longer conversations and diving deeper and not so shallow it kind of feels like you get to know the person as a person, not as just what they choose to show you, that one-sided dice.
Right. The way I formatted mine is, Wednesdays are a solo, and then Sundays I interview people. And it's been sort of such a really cool experience to because it is terrifying, as I'm sure you know. You, like you said, you have a background in stand up. It is sort of really hard to just kind of grab a microphone and start talking.
For sure.
But I imagine, I it's kind of interesting to sit back and think, like, it's hard for me to sometimes grab a microphone and start talking alone in my bedroom. What is it like to grab a microphone and start talking to a room full of people who really have no relation other than they're all facing the one direction, which is at you?
Well, like after years of doing promos, which I find like so much more, like so much easier. It just comes so much more natural. There's that veil of a character that you can hide behind. You know what I mean? Or like kind of knowing wrestling tropes and knowing just different audiences is different. If you talk a certain way in front of a wrestling audience, you know they're going to say what. If you talk with a certain type of cadence and end your words here with a strong inflection, they're going to probably pop. You know what I mean?
Right.
If you keep, there's just a way to do it. But then doing it in front of an audience you've never seen before, it has no reason to cheer you. Like, that's where I realized my entrance is like, I miss it so much when I'm on an open mic stage, because like I come out to the Etta James, it's all fantastic, people love the song, I get really into character, I get to like interact with people are like, without me needing to talk, they get me and they can kind of connect to me. And when I walk up on a stage for an open mic and it's just some guy they've never seen and they've got no reason to like me, and then I'm saying, I'm the innovator of insanity, the creator of calamity, the Duke of Delusion, and your king of confusion, punk hunk and weirdo hero, they just think, who is this asshole? And why is he so arrogant?
Right.
So it is really hard, and like trying to find the line between, I'm so used to playing Randy, but Randy's so close to being who I really am, so to being Theo, which is my like birth name. So it's like, and then finding that balance on the stage is kind of different in front of this, like a stand-up or an open mic audience. And it's fun, it's exhilarating, it's scarier than getting tossed around by Tom Lawler or Shaft or anything like that. Like, I've been in circle of fear barbed wire matches and sweat less than I have going up for 5 minutes at an open mic.
No, I can actually, no, absolutely. As someone who, my dream is to one day take one of the shows that I do on a tour.
Cool.
I definitely feel that anticipation where it's like, I would love to go do that, but also it's probably going to be absolutely fucking terrifying. But so one thing too that got brought up in there that I wanted to talk about was you mentioned coming out to the Etta James song At Last. And also another big thing of your entrance is you're obsessed with beards. I've noticed over watching you perform, but also the kissing in the audience with also, mind you, always with consent.
Thank you.
It's one thing I've appreciated because I've been to a lot of shows where wrestlers play the sort of sleazy dude and they'll go lick a girl without asking. So I've always appreciated that you can actually visibly see you say, is this okay? Cool. And then make out with a stranger in the audience. But I just kind of want to get in your mindset of that. What led to coming out to At Last, and what led to the decision to? I've been a part of your entrance at Hood Slam, like I said. Did you just one day feel like was it comfortability with the fans, or was it just like, fuck it, I'll try this out, or what was your mindset going into all that?
A little bit of both. I think a lot of healthiness can come sometimes from a performer saying fuck it. Do you know what I mean? Because I'm the type that gets in my head a lot and worries about things and tries to think things out before I do them. You know what I mean? Because I really don't want to hurt anyone, and I don't ever want to come off the wrong way or to send the wrong message. So I've always really got in my head about that stuff. So I just felt there was a certain amount of level of comfortability, and there was I think that song possesses me a little bit too, where like it's just I don't plan. Like the first kiss wasn't, it just happened. You just did it. I just went out there, and then there was a person, we locked eyes, we had this connection. I was doing kind of like the beard tickle thing, and then I just felt like it was right, and I just said, can I kiss you? And then she's like, oh yeah. And then It's like, oh, and then that
Oh
reaction
yeah.
was so great. And that just felt like,
Right.
to me, wrestling is different for everybody. You know, they have a different reason they love it. For me, it's that connection.
Right.
It's that we're touching each other. We're consentfully touching each other and safely doing things in an extreme manner, but it's all like, to me, that's what I'm missing the most during this quarantine is it's like the hug
Mm-hmm.
that is a headlock. You know what I mean? That,
Right.
and I don't think anyone but a pro wrestler might get that because you might see it from or a fan, but like from the outside, but like just that like love and affection that you can give through like that extreme masculinity. It's just, but then throwing
Right.
that flair of like sensitivity in it, just, yeah, I don't know how to describe it, and it feels like it's the right combination in my stew. And for years I've been like throwing different things in my stew, whether that be like I want to tell people that I like punk rock music, or I want to dye my hair wild colors or whatever, and it's kind of
Right.
culminated to this point.
Right. And I can sort of feel what you're communicating. The sort of there is a level of intimacy to what we
Yeah.
do. I think because it is there is violence to it that but there is that aspect where it's like you are going into it with at least one other human being, trusting them with your safety and your body and your well-being to entertain a room of people. And I think there must be a level of love and intimacy there, because I've easily seen people who don't like each other turn it into something
Mhm.
negative. So when you have two people who really respect and care for each other enough to say, "Hey, we're going to do this crazy fucking dangerous thing for probably not a lot of
Oh yeah,
money, and
undoubtedly.
we're going to do everything we can to exactly." And it's like we're going to do everything we can to protect each other. I think there is that level of intimacy that you can't get from a lot of other performance art.
Agreed.
Um
I have a question
no,
for you,
absolutely.
actually. Have you ever had
Oh yeah.
the alternative where you haven't liked an opponent, excuse me, where you haven't liked an opponent necessarily or saw eye to eye, and then after your match, after slugging it out a little bit, where you've had that chance to be that level of intimacy changed, and then walked out being like, I kind of now I get them, or that you understand them a little bit better.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, yeah, I've definitely had that moment. Especially, we the way at least the state of wrestling is where I am. There's a lot of groups of different people who don't necessarily cross work together. And me and my family, the way we work is we don't fucking care about none of that bullshit. We
Yeah,
don't,
right on.
bow to one person and we're not friends with them, so you can't work for them. Well, eat my ass. Like we can work for whoever the fuck we want. You know. But in tune with the way that world works, there's a lot of hearsay and a lot of, well, they said this about you. Well, they said this. So I have gone into shows being like, what the fuck? Like, this person's been talking all this shit. And then we go in there and, we're lighting each other up a bit. And then, you do come out with that level of respect. Like, okay, they fucking brought it, And I've never been the type to go in there and be unsafe or quote unquote tune someone
Yeah,
up.
me either.
But there is times where you're just like, hey, we're not fans of each other, so let's just make this feel a little more snug again. It's like almost consensual again.
Exactly.
Like we're gonna hit each other harder than we normally would because fuck you and fuck you, and it's kind of back and forth. And then I think it plays into that intimacy where afterwards you go, okay, we were able to be a little snug, but the whole time, even though we were hitting each other hard, they were safe
Mhm.
with me. They must have some level of care still. So it kind of flows back into it where it's like they could have easily tried to dump me on my head,
Exactly.
but they didn't.
Yeah.
They just maybe threw a forearm harder than they normally do. You know what I mean?
And then you repaid it back
Um,
right back. So it's like, again, you're right. It is, there's a weird level of consent, but like it's the weird male. It's a weird male thing that I think it gets kind of looked at, or testosterone thing, where it looks like negative always. You know what I mean? But there is a weird
right.
bond, and I think it's kind of maybe part of our reptile brain or something like that, of the idea of like once we've
Hmm.
kind of fought each other or come in, sometimes that's the only way that you're going to be physical with a person, and maybe it's that physical connection
Right.
and that exchange of energy through actually like skin on skin contact that makes you
Right.
see them more as a person because I don't know. Yeah, they've hit you, you've hit them, you're the same.
Right. I almost see it in at least the way it works in my brain is kind of like the way siblings react, right? Like siblings will beat the shit out of each other, but if you touch my brother or sister, what's up, motherfucker? You know what I mean? Like, so
Totally.
it's kind of that level of like, bang, bang, we're hitting each other, we're beating each other up, all blah, blah. But no matter what, you're always going to love and protect this person. I think it's the same way in the ring, where, you know, you may beat up on each other and not super enjoy each other, but you're never going to try and fully injure someone or let someone else do it to them, you know?
I think that's just such a good metaphor of how the world
Mm-hmm.
should work too. You know what I mean? Where like you don't need to necessarily get on the same line, but you need to like work with each other, and you don't necessarily need to work with each other the same way you would work with somebody that you love. But at the end of the day, you still need to get the job done. And I love that professionalism within wrestling. That's kind of a weird gray area, but
Right. No, absolutely. It totally is. And there's a lot of faults with the way wrestling works, but there's a lot of
oh yeah.
amazing, cool things about it. And so one sort of last topic I wanna touch on before we wrap up here. Um, also too, because we talk so much about wrestling. I wanted to kind of get into this. This is you obviously come from a performance background, like you talked about with theater, with things like that. I've also read up on that you've done a few movies actually. The two I know of are one titled Weirdo Hero, and
Mm-hmm.
then one that I haven't seen yet, but I've seen you in the trailer, which is called Heel Kick.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
is what is it like being in a production like that? About, because one thing I've noticed about wrestling movies is sometimes they're as accurate as all they can be, and then sometimes you're like, these people have never seen wrestling in their life before. So
Totally.
what was it sort of like being involved in that process, and as a wrestler, being involved with maybe some people who may have not been in the business before?
Well, with Weirdo Hero, that was like a project that was made by me and a director who I'd never met before at the time, and then another
Hmm.
wrestler. So I kind of was able to have full control over the wrestling aspect of that. So I didn't feel that
Right.
they were like there was anything that they were too out of the loop on or trying to make me do that didn't feel accurate. But definitely, I feel the same thing with you. I have trouble watching a lot of wrestling movies because I'm like, this is so not factual, which I think anyone
Right.
does if it's a movie about their profession.
Right.
And but yeah, the Weirdo Hero was mostly like the biggest trouble I had was it's very similar to my story. Like it's about
Hmm.
a wrestler who suffers from depression and stuff like that. But they wanted change the story enough that I didn't feel it comfortable using my real name or using my character's name, Ravenous Randy, and making this almost an origin story because I'm
Right.
like that's not actually what it was. So that was the hardest thing was kind of getting them to understand that as much as I support this movie, I don't want it to be my character's origin story. I need it to
It's
be
not
another
like a
character I'm
biopic.
playing.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I love being on set, and I love you talked about like doing other sorts of performances and stuff. I'd love to continue to like do more acting stuff and do more writing. The idea of wrestling is like writing and performing your own material, and
Right.
that's what I think stand up is, and I think that's what like if you gotta like write your own sketches or anything like that is kind of like writing it, creating it in your creatively, and then performing it creatively. And I like doing both of those things. So
Right.
I think there'll be more coming down the pike, hopefully. So if anyone's got any sort of weird horror movie, independent little thing that they want me to be part of, or anything like that, for sure hit me up. Or like
Right.
say check out Heel Kick or check out the Weirdo Hero. You could also see like a clip it of my face in that WWE movie, The Main Event, that came out on Netflix recently. So
Right.
yeah, there's a couple different places you can see the Weirdo Hero.
Right. No, I absolutely relate to that too. Like I said, I'm a content creator, and I'm actually making a video about a wrestling horror movie right now called Powerbomb.
Perfect. Nice.
And it is so fun to like watch those movies and then like transform them into a form of comedy that I can do and I'm comfortable with, and because I'm never the type who like there may be forms of media I don't like, but I'm never going to be like, people are dumb for watching this. If somebody finds
Totally.
enjoyment out of it and it's not harming somebody, live your life. Um, uh, but it is sort of, I feel that, like, I feel myself wanting to, like, when I'm writing a sketch and I'm going, oh shit, I see how it works, and oh, it's gonna be like this, it's gonna come off like this. You definitely get in that creative mode, and then you check your watch and it's 5:30 in the morning. You're going, oh shit, I have work in an hour.
Totally, 100%, 100%.
All right. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining me, Randy, on this episode. You've been an absolute delight.
Thank you so much.
So at the end of my podcast, I give my guests a second to go ahead and plug any socials, any projects, any way. I know you're a wrestler, so any ways to support people right now, anything like that, you can go ahead and plug.
Okay, so right now I would like to plug my Twitter's at Ravenous Randy. You can find me at the Weirdo Hero on Instagram or Randy Myers on Facebook, and send me a message if you've got any questions about anything we talked about here today, or want to comment or check out my art in any other ways. Also, just support your local independent wrestlers. Be your weird, wonderful selves. Don't hold back. Trust in yourself. Treat everyone with respect while not giving a fuck what they think about you.
Absolutely beautifully said. All that will be down in the description below. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, and all that. Go check all that stuff out. Thank you for joining us here, and most importantly, thanks for stopping by.